I'm Sarah Martinez, 29 years old, and 3 weeks ago I sat in a lawyer's office listening to my father's will being read, watching my younger brother Marcus inherit our family's construction empire worth $12 million, while I received nothing but a dusty box of old documents. What Marcus didn't know was that those seemingly worthless papers would reveal a truth that would turn his celebration into the shock of his lifetime. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, our family operated Martinez Construction, a company my grandfather built from nothing in 1952 when he immigrated from Mexico with nothing but determination and calloused hands. What started as a one-man operation laying concrete driveways had grown into the largest commercial construction firm in the Southwest, employing over 300 people and handling projects worth millions of dollars annually. My childhood was spent on construction sites wearing a tiny hard hat that Dad had custom-made for me, watching concrete trucks pour foundations and steel beams rise toward the desert sky. While other little girls played with dolls, I was fascinated by blueprints and machinery, asking endless questions about load-bearing walls and foundation depths. Dad would smile and explain everything patiently, his weathered hands pointing out details on architectural drawings spread across makeshift tables in construction trailers. Marcus, 3 years younger than me, showed zero interest in the family business. He preferred video games to construction sites, complained about the heat and dust when Dad tried to bring him along, and made faces whenever business was discussed at dinner. When Dad talked about quarterly profits or upcoming projects, Marcus would slouch in his chair and ask to be excused, usually disappearing to his room to play online games with friends. The difference in our attitudes was stark and noticeable to everyone around us. While I peppered Dad with questions about construction techniques and business strategies, Marcus rolled his eyes and counted down the minutes until he could escape. When I started working summers at the company at age 14, cleaning tools and organizing supply rooms, Marcus spent his summers at expensive basketball camps that Dad funded without question. I worked my way through every department during high school and college breaks. I learned to operate heavy machinery, read complex blueprints, manage subcontractor relationships, and handle customer complaints. By the time I graduated from Arizona State University with a degree in construction management, I had hands-on experience in every aspect of the business that many career professionals never acquire. Dad was proud of my dedication and knowledge. He would bring me to important client meetings, introducing me as his daughter who understood the business better than most of his senior managers. I felt destined to eventually take over Martinez Construction, to carry on the legacy my grandfather had started and my father had built into something magnificent. Marcus, meanwhile, drifted through college studying communications, changed his major 3 times, and barely graduated with a 2.1 GPA. He moved back home after college with no clear career direction, spending his days sleeping until noon, and his nights going out with friends whose trust funds supported their party lifestyle. Dad continued supporting him financially, paying for his car, insurance, credit card bills, and expensive nights out. When I suggested Marcus should contribute something to the family business, or at least find a job somewhere else, Dad would wave away my concerns. "He's still figuring things out," Dad would say. "Everyone matures at their own pace. Your brother just needs time to find his path." The favoritism was obvious but never explicitly acknowledged. When I received recognition for a project I had managed that came in under budget and ahead of schedule, Dad praised my work but quickly changed the subject. When Marcus mentioned a vague interest in maybe learning about the business someday, Dad lit up like Christmas morning and immediately began making plans for his involvement. Last year, when I proposed an innovative, sustainable building technique that could save the company millions while reducing environmental impact, Dad listened politely but took no action. 2 months later, when Marcus casually suggested the company should probably have a better social media presence, Dad immediately hired a marketing firm and put Marcus in charge of overseeing their work at a salary of $75,000 annually. The irony was painful but predictable. I had earned a master's degree in construction management, obtained every relevant professional certification, and spent 15 years learning the business from the ground up. Marcus had contributed a single observation about Instagram followers and was suddenly drawing a substantial salary for essentially monitoring other people's work. Despite the frustrations, I continued dedicating myself to Martinez Construction because I loved the work and believed in the company's mission. We built hospitals, schools, affordable housing complexes, and commercial buildings that would serve the community for decades. Our reputation for quality work and ethical business practices was something I took enormous pride in, even when my contributions went largely unrecognized. Dad's health began declining 2 years ago. What started as occasional fatigue and shortness of breath during site visits gradually progressed to more serious symptoms that forced him to step back from day-to-day operations. As his condition worsened, I naturally assumed more responsibility, managing major projects, handling client relationships, and making strategic decisions that kept the company running smoothly. Marcus showed little interest in Dad's health struggles beyond expressing perfunctory concern during family dinners. He continued his leisurely lifestyle, occasionally showing up at the office to check on his social media oversight responsibilities, but contributing nothing substantial to actual business operations. While I worked 60-hour weeks keeping Martinez Construction profitable and competitive, Marcus maintained his pattern of minimal effort and maximum entitlement. During Dad's final months, we had several conversations about the future of the company. He spoke about legacy, about continuing the work his father had started, about maintaining the family name in the construction industry. These conversations always felt meaningful and purposeful, leading me to believe he understood who was truly invested in the company's future. When Dad passed away 3 months ago after a brief but intense battle with lung cancer, the grief was overwhelming but expected. What I wasn't prepared for was the reading of his will and the devastating revelation that would follow. The lawyer's office on that Tuesday morning in downtown Phoenix was sterile and impersonal, with beige walls and fluorescent lighting that seemed designed to drain emotion from even the most significant moments. Marcus arrived 20 minutes late, as usual, wearing wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt that looked like he had slept in it. I had taken time off from managing 3 major construction projects to be there promptly at the scheduled time. Attorney Robert Chen, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who had handled Dad's legal affairs for over a decade, cleared his throat and began reading the lengthy document in his measured, professional tone. The will contained the expected provisions about personal belongings, charitable donations, and various financial accounts that would be distributed between family members. Then came the section about Martinez Construction. To my son Marcus Antonio Martinez, I leave controlling ownership of Martinez Construction Company, including all assets, contracts, intellectual property, and operational responsibilities. It is my hope that he will.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Continue the family legacy with the same dedication and integrity that has defined our business for over 70 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat perfectly still, trying to process what I had just heard, while Marcus straightened up in his chair, suddenly paying attention for the first time all morning. Controlling ownership meant everything. The company my grandfather built, that my father had grown into a regional powerhouse, that I had devoted my entire career to developing and improving, was now entirely in the hands of someone who couldn't be bothered to show up on time for the reading of the will. To my daughter Sarah Elena Martinez, I leave the contents of my personal office filing cabinet, including all historical documents, photographs, and papers related to the family business history. A filing cabinet, 30 years of dedication, professional expertise, and unwavering commitment to the family legacy, and I inherited a filing cabinet full of old papers. The contrast was so stark, it would have been laughable if it weren't so devastating. Marcus was grinning now, his usual slouched posture replaced by an almost predatory alertness. He asked Attorney Chen several questions about timelines for assuming control, about liquidating certain assets, about his authority to make major business decisions. Each question felt like another knife twist, revealing his immediate plans to treat the company as his personal cash machine, rather than a business requiring careful stewardship. I managed to maintain my composure throughout the remainder of the meeting, asking only a few practical questions about the transition timeline and my continued employment status. Attorney Chen confirmed that as the new owner, Marcus would have complete authority over all personnel decisions, including my position as operations manager. After the meeting, Marcus suggested we grab lunch to celebrate his inheritance and discuss my future role in his company. His company. The casual way he said it, the assumption that I would be grateful for whatever crumbs he might offer, was almost more insulting than the will itself. I declined lunch and drove directly to the construction site where we were building a new medical complex, a project I had been managing for 8 months. Standing among the steel beams and concrete forms that I understood better than most licensed contractors, I tried to make sense of what had just happened. 3 days later, Marcus called a company-wide meeting to announce his new role as owner and CEO of Martinez Construction. He had clearly prepared remarks, probably written by someone else, about honoring our father's legacy and continuing the company's tradition of excellence. The speech was polished but hollow, filled with buzzwords and empty promises that anyone who knew Marcus could see right through. After the meeting, several long-term employees approached me privately to express their concerns. These were men and women who had worked with me for years, who understood my capabilities and dedication to the company. They were worried about the future under Marcus's leadership, and frankly, so was I. Within 2 weeks of taking control, Marcus made several decisions that confirmed everyone's worst fears. He gave himself a salary increase to $200,000 annually, purchased a new BMW with company funds, and hired 3 of his college friends for vaguely defined executive positions at salaries that exceeded what experienced project managers were earning. More troubling were his operational decisions. He canceled our contract with a safety consulting firm to save money, despite the fact that construction safety was both a legal requirement and a moral obligation. He began pushing project managers to cut corners on materials and labor costs, prioritizing short-term profits over the quality standards that had built our reputation. When I attempted to discuss these concerns with him, Marcus dismissed my input as jealousy over his inheritance. "You need to accept the new reality, Sarah," he told me during a tense conversation in his newly redecorated office. "Dad chose me to run this company, and you need to decide whether you can support that decision or find somewhere else to work." The threat was clear. Fall in line or find another job. After 15 years of dedication to Martinez Construction, my own brother was essentially telling me I was expendable. The family business that I understood better than anyone, that I had helped grow and modernize, was now being managed by someone whose primary qualification was being born male. I began seriously considering other employment options. Several competitors had approached me over the years with job offers, recognizing my expertise and reputation in the local construction industry. With my experience and professional connections, finding a good position elsewhere wouldn't be particularly difficult. But leaving felt like abandoning everything I had worked for, everything my grandfather and father had built. Martinez Construction wasn't just a job for me. It was my identity, my passion, my life's work. The thought of walking away while Marcus ran it into the ground was almost unbearable. That's when I remembered the filing cabinet. Dad's personal office had been cleaned out shortly after the funeral, with most items distributed to family members or donated to charity. The filing cabinet Attorney Chen had mentioned was sitting in the garage at my apartment, collecting dust among boxes of Christmas decorations and old college textbooks. In the chaos of grief and the shock of the will reading, I had completely forgotten about my inheritance of old papers and photographs. One rainy Saturday morning in November, I finally decided to go through the contents of the filing cabinet. I wasn't expecting to find anything particularly valuable or meaningful, just hoping to discover some family photographs or perhaps letters from my grandfather that might provide comfort during this difficult time. The top drawer contained what I expected: old family photos, including pictures of my grandfather breaking ground on his first commercial project, images of my father as a young man learning the business, and various family gatherings over the decades. These were precious to me personally, but had no bearing on my current situation with Marcus and the company. The second drawer held business documents from the early years of Martinez Construction, contracts from the 1960s and 1970s, correspondence with clients, financial records that showed the company's steady growth under my father's leadership. Again, historically interesting but not particularly relevant to current circumstances. The bottom drawer was locked. I searched through Dad's personal effects until I found a small key ring that included what appeared to be the right key. Inside the bottom drawer were documents I had never seen before. papers that had been carefully preserved and organized in a way that suggested they were particularly important. The first document I examined was a legal agreement dated 1987, written in dense legal language that required careful reading to understand. As I worked through the complex terminology, a stunning realization began to emerge. According to this document, when my grandfather had decided to expand Martinez Construction in the late 1980s, he had needed significant capital for equipment purchases and to finance several large projects. Rather than seeking traditional bank loans or outside investors, he had entered into a unique agreement with his daughter-in-law, my mother Elena Martinez. My mother had inherited a substantial sum from her own father's successful restaurant business in Tucson. Rather than keeping this inheritance separate, she had chosen to invest it in Martinez Construction as a silent partner. The legal agreement spelled out the terms clearly. Elena Martinez would provide capital funding in exchange for a 51% ownership stake in the company, while my grandfather would retain 49% ownership and continue as the operational manager. The document was signed by both parties and properly notarized, making it a legally binding contract that had apparently never been revoked or modified. According to these papers, my mother had been the majority owner of Martinez Construction for over 30 years, a fact that had somehow been kept secret from everyone, including her own children. But there was more. A second document, dated just 6 months before my father's death, showed that my mother had transferred her majority ownership stake to someone else. The beneficiary listed on this transfer document was Sarah Elena Martinez. Me. I read the document 3 times before the full implications sank in. According to these papers, I wasn't just an employee of Martinez Construction, who had been unfairly passed over in my father's will. I was the majority owner of the entire company. My hands were shaking as I continued searching through the remaining documents in the drawer. There were financial records showing my mother's ongoing investments in company growth over the decades, correspondence between her and my father about business decisions, and detailed documentation of how her capital had been used to fund the company's expansion into commercial construction. The final document in the collection was a letter in my mother's handwriting, addressed to me personally. "My dearest Sarah," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means your father and I are both gone, and you have finally discovered the truth about Martinez Construction that we kept secret for so many years. When your grandfather needed capital to grow the business in 1987, I chose to invest my inheritance because I believed in the family legacy and wanted to secure the company's future. Your father and I agreed that maintaining the appearance of traditional male ownership would be better for business relationships in the construction industry, which was even more male-dominated in those days than it is now. Over the years, I watched you develop a genuine passion for the business, learning every aspect of construction and management with a dedication that neither your father nor I had expected. Meanwhile, Marcus showed little interest in anything beyond the financial benefits the company could provide him. As my health declined, I made the decision to transfer ownership to you because I knew you would protect and nurture what your grandfather built. You have the knowledge, the dedication, and the integrity to lead Martinez Construction into the future. I'm sorry we kept this secret from you for so long. I'm sorry you had to discover it this way, after experiencing the pain of believing you had been overlooked and undervalued. You were never overlooked, my dear daughter. You are being prepared for this responsibility your entire life. The company is yours now. Use your ownership wisely, and remember that true leadership means serving others, not serving yourself. All my love, Mom." I sat on my garage floor, surrounded by decades-old documents, holding my mother's letter, trying to process the magnitude of what I had just discovered. The company I thought I had lost was actually mine. The brother who had been gloating about his inheritance was actually working for me. The future I thought had been destroyed was actually just beginning. The legal implications were clear, but the emotional impact was overwhelming. Relief, vindication, excitement, and a dozen other emotions crashed over me in waves. For weeks, I had been grieving not just my father's death, but also the loss of my life's work and professional identity. Now I realized that neither had actually been lost. But with ownership came enormous responsibility. Martinez Construction employed over 300 people whose livelihoods depended on the company's success. We had millions of dollars in ongoing projects, client relationships that had been built over decades, and a reputation in the construction industry that had taken 3 generations to establish. Marcus had been making decisions as owner for over a month, some of which were already causing problems with long-term clients and employees. His cost-cutting measures and corner-cutting policies were beginning to affect project quality and worker safety. Several experienced project managers had already started looking for other positions, concerned about the company's direction under his leadership. I needed to act quickly to protect the company, but I also needed to be strategic about how I revealed my ownership and reasserted control. Simply walking into Marcus's office with the documents and demanding he step aside would likely create chaos and potentially damage the company's reputation and operations. After consulting with my own attorney, who confirmed that the ownership documents were legally valid and binding, I developed a plan for reclaiming control of Martinez Construction in a way that would minimize disruption to ongoing operations and client relationships. The first step was documenting all of Marcus's decisions and actions since taking control, creating a comprehensive record of changes he had made to company policies, personnel, and operations. Some of his decisions could be quickly reversed, while others would require more careful handling to avoid creating additional problems. Next, I scheduled individual meetings with key employees, long-term clients, and important subcontractors to assess their concerns about recent changes and to prepare them for a transition in leadership. I couldn't reveal the ownership situation yet, but I wanted to understand the full scope of issues that would need to be addressed. The feedback from these conversations was worse than I had feared. Marcus's cost-cutting measures were already causing quality problems on 2 major projects. His decision to eliminate the safety consulting contract had resulted in a minor accident that could have been prevented with proper protocols. 3 experienced foremen had already given notice, and 2 long-term clients were expressing concerns about continuing their relationships with Martinez Construction. It was clear that immediate action was needed to prevent further damage to the company my family had spent 70 years building. On a Tuesday morning in December, I walked into Marcus's office carrying a leather portfolio containing copies of all the ownership documents. He was sitting behind Dad's massive oak desk, which he had already redecorated with expensive artwork and a new sound system, reviewing what appeared to be plans for further office renovations using company funds. "We need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me and taking a seat across from his desk. Marcus looked up with the slightly annoyed expression he had perfected over the past month whenever I attempted to discuss business matters with him. "If this is another one of your complaints about company policies, Sarah, I've told you my decision is final. You can either support the direction I'm taking this company or find somewhere else to work." "Actually," I said, opening the portfolio and removing the first document, "this is about who actually has the authority to make those decisions." I placed my mother's ownership transfer document on his desk, watching his expression change from annoyance to confusion as he scanned the legal language. "This document shows that Mom was the majority owner of Martinez Construction for over 30 years, and that she transferred that ownership to me 6 months before Dad died." Marcus picked up the document, reading more carefully now, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the beginning of understanding. "What is this supposed to be? Some kind of joke?" I placed the original 1987 partnership agreement on the desk next to the transfer document. This shows how Mom became the majority owner in the first place, when Grandpa needed capital to expand the company. She invested her inheritance from her father's restaurant business in exchange for 51% ownership. The color was draining from Marcus's face as he realized these weren't forged documents or elaborate pranks. These were real legal agreements that had been properly executed and notarized. Documents that fundamentally changed everything he thought he knew about the company he believed he had inherited. There were more documents in the portfolio: financial records, correspondence, and my mother's letter explaining her decision to transfer ownership to me. I laid them out methodically, creating an undeniable paper trail that established my legal right to control Martinez Construction. "This can't be real," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad left me the company. The will was clear. Dad left you what he thought he owned," I explained. "But according to these documents, he only owned 49% of the company. Mom owned 51%, and she chose to transfer that majority stake to me." Marcus was silent for several minutes, studying the documents spread across the desk, probably hoping to find some flaw or loophole that would invalidate what he was seeing. But the paperwork was thorough and professionally prepared, leaving no room for doubt about its authenticity or legal validity. Finally, he looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before. Gone was the arrogant confidence that had characterized his behavior since the will reading. In its place was confusion, fear, and the dawning realization that his month-long reign as company owner was over. "What does this mean?" he asked quietly. "It means I'm the majority owner of Martinez Construction," I said. "It means every decision you've made over the past month was done without proper authority. And it means we need to discuss how to transition the company back to responsible leadership before any more damage is done." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult I've ever had with my brother. Marcus had not only spent company money on personal expenses and unnecessary luxuries, but he had also made operational decisions that were actively harming the business our family had spent generations building. We talked for over 2 hours about the changes that needed to be made immediately to stabilize operations and restore client confidence. Marcus would step down as CEO and return to his previous role overseeing social media marketing at a salary more appropriate to his actual contributions. The expensive car would be returned, the unnecessary executive positions eliminated, and proper safety protocols restored immediately. To his credit, Marcus didn't try to deny the validity of the ownership documents or demand to see additional proof. He seemed genuinely shocked by the revelation that our mother had been the real power behind Martinez Construction for decades, but he accepted the legal reality of his situation. The transition wasn't seamless, but it was swift. Within a week, I had officially assumed the role of CEO and president of Martinez Construction, with Marcus returning to his social media oversight responsibilities. The expensive office renovations were canceled, company policies were restored to their previous standards, and I began the process of rebuilding relationships with clients and employees who had been concerned about the company's recent direction. The response from employees was overwhelmingly positive. Long-term workers who had watched me grow up in the business and had seen my dedication over the years were relieved to have experienced leadership restored. The project managers who had been considering other positions decided to stay, and the quality control issues that had begun developing under Marcus's cost-cutting measures were quickly resolved. Client relationships required more careful attention. Several major customers had expressed concerns about continuing their business with Martinez Construction under Marcus's leadership, worried about quality standards and project management capabilities. I spent considerable time meeting with these clients personally, reviewing their projects, and demonstrating that the company was returning to the standards of excellence they had come to expect. Within 6 months of reclaiming ownership, Martinez Construction had not only stabilized, but was actually performing better than it had in years. The combination of experienced leadership, restored quality standards, and renewed employee confidence resulted in several major new contracts and significant improvements in both profitability and reputation. Marcus has adjusted to his new reality with better grace than I expected. He continues working in social media oversight, a role that suits his interests and capabilities without giving him authority over crucial business operations. Our relationship is still somewhat strained, but we're working toward rebuilding family trust alongside professional cooperation. The most profound change has been in my own understanding of family legacy and business responsibility. Learning that my mother had been the true power behind Martinez Construction for decades gave me a new appreciation for the strength and sacrifice of the women who came before me. Her decision to remain silent about her ownership, allowing my father and grandfather to maintain the public face of the business while she provided the financial backbone, demonstrated a kind of strategic thinking and long-term vision that I'm still learning to emulate. Running Martinez Construction as the official owner rather than just a dedicated employee has brought new challenges and responsibilities. Every decision I make affects not just my own future but the livelihoods of hundreds of employees and their families. The weight of that responsibility is both humbling and motivating, pushing me to continue learning and growing as a leader. The company my grandfather started with nothing but determination and hard work, that my mother quietly supported and strengthened for decades, that my father grew into a regional powerhouse, is now officially mine to guide into the future. It's a responsibility I don't take lightly, and an opportunity I'm determined not to waste. Looking back on that devastating morning in the lawyer's office when I thought I had lost everything I cared about professionally, I realize now that I was actually receiving the greatest gift my family could give me: the chance to lead with full authority and clear vision, backed by 3 generations of hard work and sacrifice. The dusty filing cabinet that seemed like such an insulting inheritance turned out to contain the keys to my future and the validation of a lifetime of dedication. Sometimes the most valuable gifts come in the most unexpected packages, hidden away until the moment when we're ready to receive them, and strong enough to handle the responsibility they represent. The weeks following my revelation to Marcus were a whirlwind of legal consultations, operational restructuring, and careful relationship management. While the ownership documents were legally ironclad, I knew that simply brandishing papers wouldn't automatically solve the complex problems that had developed during Marcus's brief but destructive tenure as supposed CEO. My first priority was conducting a comprehensive audit of every decision Marcus had made since assuming control. What I discovered was worse than I had initially realized. Beyond the obvious issues like his inflated salary and company-funded luxury purchases, there were deeper structural problems that threatened the very foundation of Martinez Construction's reputation and financial stability. The safety consulting contract Marcus had canceled to save money had been worth $35,000 annually, a relatively modest expense for a company our size. However, the expertise those consultants provided was invaluable, especially given the increasingly complex safety regulations governing commercial construction. Their regular site visits, safety training programs, and compliance monitoring had prevented countless accidents over the years and ensured our insurance premiums remained manageable. Without their oversight, 3 separate safety violations had occurred in just 1 month. While no one had been seriously injured, the potential for catastrophic accidents had increased exponentially. More troubling was the fact that these violations had been reported to state regulatory authorities, creating a paper trail that could affect our ability to bid on future government contracts. I immediately contacted Safety First Consulting and arranged for an emergency assessment of all active job sites. The report they delivered was sobering. Multiple OSHA violations, inadequate fall protection systems, improperly stored hazardous materials, and insufficient safety training documentation across 7 different projects. Correcting these issues would cost over $200,000 and require significant delays in project completion schedules. The cost-cutting measures Marcus had implemented with materials and subcontractors were equally problematic. In an industry where reputation for quality is everything, his decisions to source cheaper materials and hire lower-cost subcontractors had already begun affecting the quality of our finished work. 2 clients had filed formal complaints about substandard concrete work, and a 3rd project required extensive rework when electrical installations failed inspection due to the use of inferior components. Perhaps most damaging was Marcus's decision to delay payments to several long-term subcontractors in order to improve short-term cash flow numbers. These were companies Martinez Construction had worked with for decades, relationships my father and grandfather had cultivated through consistent fair dealing and prompt payment. Some of these subcontractors had begun refusing new work assignments, while others were demanding payment in advance before starting any projects. The ripple effects of these decisions extended far beyond immediate financial costs. Our bonding company, which provided the performance bonds required for most commercial projects, had received reports about the safety violations and quality complaints. They scheduled an emergency review of our bonding capacity, with the clear implication that our ability to bid on large projects could be severely restricted if we couldn't demonstrate immediate corrective action. Rebuilding trust with our workforce proved to be an equally complex challenge. The 3 college friends Marcus had hired for executive positions had spent their brief tenure making arbitrary policy changes and issuing contradictory directives to experienced project managers who had been successfully doing their jobs for years. Morale had plummeted as skilled workers found themselves taking orders from inexperienced 20-somethings whose primary qualifications were their friendship with the boss. Frank Delgado, our most experienced project superintendent who had been with the company for 18 years, requested a private meeting during my 2nd week as official CEO. Frank was a steady, unflappable man who had successfully managed some of our most challenging projects. If he was concerned enough to request a formal meeting, The situation was serious. "Sarah, I've been thinking about retirement," Frank told me as we sat in my office overlooking the main construction yard. "I had planned to work another 5 years, but the past month has been harder than anything I've dealt with in nearly 2 decades with this company." Frank went on to explain how Marcus's inexperienced executive hires had been interfering with established project management procedures, countermanding decisions made by experienced supervisors, and creating confusion among work crews who didn't know whose instructions to follow. The result was decreased productivity, increased mistakes, and a general atmosphere of uncertainty that was affecting every aspect of operations. More troubling was Frank's report that several of our best workers were actively looking for positions with competitors. These weren't just any employees, but skilled craftsmen and experienced supervisors whose expertise was irreplaceable. Losing them would not only affect our current projects but would also make it much more difficult to maintain quality standards on future work. "I've got calls from Peterson Construction and Southwest Builders asking if I'd be interested in bringing some of our crew with me," Frank continued. "They know what's been happening here, and they're actively recruiting our people. I haven't said yes to anything yet, but Sarah, I need to know this company is going to return to the standards your father maintained." That conversation crystallized for me just how much damage Marcus had done in such a short time. It wasn't just about money or policies that could be changed with new directives. The culture of excellence and professionalism that had taken decades to build was being actively dismantled by people who didn't understand its value or importance. I spent the remainder of that week conducting similar conversations with every department head and key employee. The pattern was consistent across all areas of the company. Experienced professionals were frustrated by inexperienced oversight, established procedures were being modified without consideration for their effectiveness, and the general atmosphere was one of uncertainty and declining standards. The financial audit I commissioned revealed additional problems that Marcus either hadn't understood or had chosen to ignore. The cost-cutting measures that had appeared to improve short-term profitability were actually creating long-term financial liabilities that would far exceed any temporary savings. The cheaper materials being used on current projects would likely result in warranty claims and required repairs within the next 2 years. The subcontractors Marcus had hired to replace our more expensive but reliable partners were already causing schedule delays and quality issues that would result in penalty payments to clients. The deferred maintenance on company equipment and vehicles was creating safety hazards and would soon require expensive repairs or replacements. Most concerning was the discovery that Marcus had been using company credit lines to fund his personal expenses and executive salary increases. While technically this wasn't illegal since he believed he owned the company, it had reduced our available credit at a time when we needed maximum financial flexibility to address the operational problems he had created. I realized that simply removing Marcus from the CEO position and reversing his policies wouldn't be sufficient to restore Martinez Construction to its previous level of performance. We needed a comprehensive recovery plan that addressed not only the immediate operational issues, but also the longer-term reputation and relationship damage that had occurred. Working with our accounting firm and legal counsel, I developed a 90-day recovery plan that prioritized the most critical issues while establishing timelines for addressing longer-term problems. The plan required significant upfront investment, but the alternative was watching the company my family had built over 70 years slowly collapse under the weight of poor decisions made during 1 month of misguided leadership. The first phase focused on immediate safety and quality issues. Safety First Consulting was brought back with an expanded contract that included daily site visits and accelerated safety training for all crew members. The inferior materials on current projects were replaced at company expense, even when it meant absorbing significant cost overruns. Subcontractor relationships were repaired through a combination of immediate payment settlements and premium rates for rush work needed to get projects back on schedule. Phase 2 addressed personnel and organizational issues. Marcus's executive hires were terminated immediately, with generous severance packages to minimize potential legal complications. The arbitrary policy changes were reversed, and clear authority structures were reestablished with experienced managers back in control of their respective departments. I instituted weekly all-hands meetings to ensure clear communication and provide forums for addressing concerns before they became larger problems. The financial recovery plan required the most careful handling. I had to find ways to fund the necessary improvements without jeopardizing the company's long-term financial stability. This meant negotiating extended payment terms with some vendors, securing additional credit lines using my personal assets as collateral, and deferring some planned equipment purchases until cash flows stabilized. Throughout this process, Marcus maintained a surprisingly professional attitude about his demotion and the revelation that he had never actually owned the company. I had expected anger, resentment, or attempts to undermine the recovery efforts, but instead he seemed almost relieved to be free of responsibilities he had never really wanted in the first place. During one of our weekly transition meetings, Marcus made a comment that provided insight into his perspective on the entire situation. "I never really understood why Dad thought I should run this company," he said. "I mean, I knew you were better at all the technical stuff, but I figured I could hire people to handle that while I focused on big-picture strategy." The conversation that followed revealed that Marcus had accepted the CEO role primarily because he thought it would provide financial security and social status, not because he had any genuine interest in construction or business management. He had assumed that owning a successful company would be similar to owning a profitable investment, generating income without requiring significant personal involvement or expertise. This misunderstanding explained many of his poor decisions. Marcus had viewed Martinez Construction as a cash machine, rather than an operating business that required careful management and continuous attention. His cost-cutting measures and personnel changes had been motivated by a desire to maximize short-term profits, rather than maintain long-term operational excellence. Understanding Marcus's perspective helped me develop a more constructive approach to his continued involvement with the company. Rather than treating him as a potential threat or source of ongoing problems, I began looking for ways to utilize his actual strengths, while keeping him away from areas where his lack of experience could cause damage. Marcus had always been socially outgoing and comfortable in public speaking situations. His work overseeing the company's social media presence had actually been reasonably successful, increasing our online visibility and generating several new client inquiries. There was potential to expand this role into broader marketing and community relations responsibilities that would provide meaningful work without giving him authority over operational decisions. I proposed that Marcus transition into a Director of Marketing and Community Relations position, with responsibility for social media, public relations, trade association involvement, and community engagement activities. The role would utilize his communication skills and social comfort, while keeping him focused on external relationships rather than internal operations. To my surprise, Marcus responded enthusiastically to this proposal. The new role would allow him to represent the company at industry events, community functions, and networking opportunities, activities he actually enjoyed and performed well. It would also provide a clear career path that didn't require him to master technical construction knowledge or develop complex project management skills. We spent several weeks defining the scope and expectations for Marcus's new role, establishing clear boundaries between marketing activities and operational decisions. The arrangement wasn't perfect, but it provided a way for him to contribute meaningfully to the company's success while playing to his actual strengths, rather than expecting him to excel in areas where he lacked both interest and expertise. The recovery process revealed several important lessons about family business dynamics and the importance of aligning responsibilities with capabilities. Dad had made the mistake of assuming that ownership should automatically transfer to the oldest son, regardless of whether that person had the interest, skills, or temperament needed for effective leadership. This traditional approach had nearly destroyed the company our family had spent generations building. Mom's decision to maintain secret ownership while allowing Dad to serve as the public face of the company had been strategically brilliant for its time. In an industry where female leadership was rare and often met with skepticism, her behind-the-scenes approach had allowed Martinez Construction to grow and prosper, while she provided crucial financial backing and strategic guidance. However, keeping the ownership structure secret had also created the conditions for the crisis we were now managing. If Marcus had known from the beginning that he would not inherit controlling ownership, he might have pursued different career paths better suited to his interests and abilities. If I had known about my mother's ownership stake, I could have been better prepared for leadership responsibilities and might have been able to prevent some of the problems that developed. The experience taught me that transparency and honest communication about succession planning are essential for family businesses. While Mom's secretive approach had worked during her generation, the changing business environment and family dynamics required more open discussion about roles, responsibilities, and expectations. As the 90-day recovery plan progressed, the results were encouraging but came at significant cost. Safety violations were corrected and new training programs implemented, but the process required substantial overtime payments and schedule delays that affected our relationships with several clients. Quality issues were resolved through expensive rework and material replacements, but the cost overruns reduced profit margins on affected projects to nearly zero. The personnel situation stabilized as experienced managers regained authority over their departments, and arbitrary policy changes were reversed. However, we still lost 3 key employees to competitors, requiring expensive recruitment and training efforts to replace their expertise. The disruption to established working relationships and procedures would take months to fully overcome. Financial recovery proved to be the most challenging aspect of the entire process. The combination of safety corrections, quality improvements, personnel changes, and equipment repairs required an investment of over $400,000 during the first quarter under my leadership. While this expenditure was necessary to restore operational standards, it significantly impacted cash flow and required careful management to avoid creating liquidity problems. I found myself working 70-hour weeks, splitting time between managing current projects, overseeing the recovery efforts, and developing strategies for rebuilding client relationships and market reputation. The stress was enormous, but so was the motivation to prove that Martinez Construction could return to the excellence standards that had defined our work for decades. One of the most satisfying aspects of the recovery process was watching employee morale gradually improve as people regained confidence in the company's direction and leadership. Frank Delgado withdrew his retirement plans and agreed to lead a new apprenticeship program designed to develop the next generation of skilled craftsmen. Several employees who had been considering other opportunities decided to stay, citing their renewed confidence in the company's future. Client relationships required more delicate handling. The safety violations and quality complaints had damaged our reputation with several long-term customers who were evaluating whether to continue using Martinez Construction for future projects. I spent considerable time meeting personally with these clients, reviewing their concerns, and demonstrating the corrective actions we had implemented. These meetings were often uncomfortable, requiring me to acknowledge problems while explaining the circumstances that had led to their occurrence. However, most clients appreciated the direct communication and were willing to give us another opportunity to prove we had resolved the underlying issues. The key was being completely honest about what had gone wrong while providing concrete evidence of the steps being taken to prevent similar problems in the future. The bonding company review process was particularly stressful, as their decision would directly affect our ability to bid on large commercial projects. The review included detailed examination of our safety records, quality control procedures, financial stability, and management capabilities. The team conducting the review was professional but thorough, asking probing questions about every aspect of our operations. I prepared for the bonding review as if I were defending a doctoral dissertation, organizing comprehensive documentation of our corrective actions, new safety protocols, quality control improvements, and financial projections. The presentation took 4 hours and included site visits to current projects where the reviewers could observe our operations firsthand. The outcome was better than I had dared hope. While our bonding capacity was temporarily reduced by 20%, we retained the ability to bid on most types of projects. The bonding company cited the comprehensive corrective actions and experienced leadership as factors in their decision to maintain our relationship. More importantly, they established a timeline for reviewing our capacity restrictions, with the possibility of full restoration within 12 months if we maintained improved safety and quality standards. By the end of the 90-day recovery period, Martinez Construction had stabilized operationally and financially, though we were still dealing with the longer-term consequences of Marcus's brief tenure as supposed CEO. Project schedules were back on track, safety violations had been corrected, quality standards were restored, and employee morale was gradually improving. However, the recovery had been expensive both financially and in terms of market reputation. profit margins for the fiscal year would be significantly below historical averages due to the cost of corrective actions and rework. Several potential clients had chosen to work with competitors rather than risk problems with a company that had recently experienced well-publicized difficulties. The experience reinforced my understanding that business reputation is both incredibly valuable and surprisingly fragile. Relationships and trust that take years to build can be seriously damaged in just weeks if operational standards decline or leadership makes poor decisions. Rebuilding that trust requires not only correcting the problems, but also demonstrating sustained commitment to excellence over time. As I reflected on the challenges of the past few months, I realized that discovering my ownership of Martinez Construction had been both a tremendous opportunity and an enormous responsibility. The legal documents in Mom's filing cabinet had given me the authority to lead the company, but they couldn't provide the knowledge, experience, or wisdom needed to navigate complex business challenges successfully. The real test of my leadership wasn't whether I could prove legal ownership or remove Marcus from positions of authority he shouldn't have held. The test was whether I could actually manage the company more effectively than he had, making decisions that would restore operational excellence while positioning Martinez Construction for long-term growth and success. Looking ahead, I knew there were still significant challenges to address. The construction industry was becoming increasingly competitive, with new companies entering the market and established competitors expanding their service offerings. Technology was changing the way projects were designed and managed, requiring investments in new software systems and training for employees who weren't necessarily comfortable with digital tools. Environmental regulations were becoming more stringent, requiring new approaches to waste management, energy efficiency, and sustainable building practices. Labor costs were rising as skilled craftsmen became harder to find and retain, particularly in a strong economy where construction workers had multiple employment options. These industry-wide challenges would require strategic thinking and careful planning to navigate successfully. Unlike the crisis management of the past few months, addressing longer-term strategic issues would require a different set of skills and approaches. I would need to develop capabilities as a strategic leader, not just as a crisis manager or operational expert. The transformation from dedicated employee to company owner had fundamentally changed my perspective on every aspect of the business. Decisions that had once been recommendations to management were now mine to make, with full responsibility for their consequences. The financial performance that had once been someone else's concern was now directly tied to my personal success and the security of everyone who worked for the company. This shift in perspective was both liberating and terrifying. I had the authority to implement changes I had long believed would benefit the company, but I also bore full responsibility if those changes didn't produce the expected results. There was no longer anyone else to blame for poor decisions or missed opportunities. The leadership transition had also changed my relationship with Marcus in ways I was still learning to navigate. We were no longer equals competing for parental approval or family recognition. I was now his boss in the most literal sense, with authority over his compensation, job responsibilities, and employment security. He was adapting to this change with better grace than I had expected, but the adjustment was ongoing for both of us. Family dinners had become somewhat awkward as we all learned to navigate the new power dynamics. Mom, who had been secretly orchestrating family business decisions for decades, seemed relieved that her ownership transfer had been discovered and implemented. Dad would have been proud, she told me during one of our recent conversations, though I sometimes wonder if he ever suspected the truth about who really controlled the company. The broader family reaction to the ownership revelation had been mixed. Some relatives expressed surprise at Mom's secret role in the business, while others claimed they had always suspected she was more involved than she appeared. A few family members seemed disappointed that Marcus had lost his inheritance, though most appeared to support the idea that operational control should rest with whoever was best qualified to exercise it effectively. As Martinez Construction moved forward under my official leadership, I was determined to learn from the mistakes of the past while building on the strengths that had sustained the company for over 70 years. The crisis precipitated by Marcus's misguided leadership had been painful and expensive, but it had also provided valuable lessons about the importance of preparation, communication, and alignment between authority and capability. The company my grandfather had built from nothing, that my mother had quietly supported for decades, that my father had grown into a regional leader, was now officially mine to guide into the future. It was a responsibility I accepted with both humility and determination, knowing that the choices I made would affect not only my own future, but the livelihoods of hundreds of employees and their families. The road ahead would undoubtedly present new challenges and opportunities that would test my leadership abilities in ways I couldn't yet anticipate. But for the first time since that devastating morning in the lawyer's office, I felt confident that Martinez Construction was heading in the right direction, under leadership that combined legal authority with operational expertise and genuine commitment to excellence. The dusty filing cabinet that had seemed like such an inadequate inheritance had indeed contained the keys to my future, but more importantly, it had provided the foundation for ensuring that 3 generations of family dedication and sacrifice would continue to benefit the employees, clients, and community that depended on Martinez Construction's success. 18 months after reclaiming Martinez Construction, I stood in the conference room overlooking Phoenix's skyline, watching as our legal team finalized the contracts for the largest project in our company's history. The city of Phoenix had just awarded us the contract to build their new municipal complex, a $40 million project that would establish Martinez Construction as one of the premier commercial builders in the Southwest. The irony wasn't lost on me that this contract signing was taking place in the same building where I had first learned about my supposed inheritance of nothing more than old documents. The lawyer's office where Marcus had inherited what he thought was everything was just 3 floors below us, and I couldn't help but smile at how dramatically things had changed since that devastating morning. The municipal complex project represented far more than just financial success. During the competitive bidding process, the selection committee had specifically cited Martinez Construction's renewed commitment to safety excellence, quality craftsmanship, and innovative building techniques as factors in their decision. We had not only recovered from the damage Marcus's leadership had caused, but we had emerged stronger and more competitive than ever before. The 18 months of rebuilding had taught me lessons about leadership that no business school could have provided. Running a company during a crisis requires different skills than managing during stable times, and I had been forced to develop capabilities I never knew I possessed. The experience had transformed me from someone who understood construction and project management into someone who could navigate complex business relationships, financial challenges, and strategic planning decisions. Frank Delgado had become one of my most trusted advisors during this transformation. His 18 years of experience with Martinez Construction provided institutional knowledge that proved invaluable as we worked to restore operational excellence while implementing new systems and procedures. The apprenticeship program he developed had already graduated 12 new craftsmen who were now contributing to our projects while building careers that would sustain them for decades. What impressed me most about Frank's leadership was his ability to balance respect for traditional construction methods with openness to technological innovations that could improve efficiency and safety. He had embraced the new project management software systems we implemented, even though learning new technology wasn't easy for someone who had spent most of his career working with paper blueprints and manual scheduling systems. The technology investments had been substantial but necessary. The construction industry was evolving rapidly, with clients expecting real-time project updates, digital collaboration tools, and sophisticated scheduling systems that could adapt to changing conditions. Our investment in state-of-the-art project management platforms had already paid dividends in improved communication, reduced errors, and enhanced client satisfaction. Marcus had settled into his role as Director of Marketing and Community Relations with surprising effectiveness. His natural social skills and comfort in public speaking situations made him genuinely valuable in representing Martinez Construction at industry events, community functions, and networking opportunities. He had developed relationships with potential clients, subcontractors, and industry partners that had resulted in several new business opportunities. More importantly, Marcus seemed genuinely happy in his new role. He no longer carried the stress and uncertainty that had characterized his brief tenure as supposed CEO. He understood his responsibilities, felt confident in his abilities to fulfill them, and appreciated having clear boundaries that prevented him from making decisions outside his expertise. Our working relationship had evolved into something approaching true professional collaboration. Marcus would identify potential clients through his networking activities, then bring me into the conversation when technical discussions or contract negotiations were required. He handled public relations and community engagement activities that I found time-consuming and sometimes challenging, while I focused on operational excellence and strategic planning decisions. The family dynamics had also stabilized in unexpected ways. Mom's decision to reveal her secret ownership and transfer control to me had lifted a burden she had carried for decades. During our weekly lunches, she often spoke about the relief of no longer having to make important business decisions, while pretending to have no authority or involvement. She had started attending industry events as Martinez Construction's founding family member, a role she embraced with enthusiasm after years of staying in the background. Her presence at these events provided historical perspective and demonstrated the company's deep roots in the Phoenix construction community. Clients and partners were consistently impressed by her knowledge of the industry and her stories about the company's evolution over the decades. The financial recovery had exceeded even my most optimistic projections. After absorbing the costs of Marcus's mistakes and investing heavily in safety improvements, quality enhancements, and technology upgrades, Martinez Construction was now more profitable than it had ever been. The combination of improved operational efficiency, enhanced reputation, and strategic project selection had resulted in profit margins that were substantially higher than industry averages. This financial success had allowed us to establish an employee profit-sharing program that distributed annual bonuses based on both individual performance and overall company success. The program had been enthusiastically received by our workforce and had contributed to significantly improved employee retention rates. When skilled workers know they share directly in the company's success, they become more invested in maintaining the quality standards and operational excellence that drive profitability. We had also established a formal safety recognition program that provided both financial rewards and public acknowledgement for individuals and teams who demonstrated exceptional commitment to workplace safety. The program had contributed to an accident rate that was now less than half the industry average, which not only protected our employees but also reduced insurance costs and enhanced our reputation with clients who prioritized safety performance. The bonding company that had reduced our capacity during the crisis period had not only restored our full bonding limits, but had also offered us preferred rates, based on our demonstrated commitment to operational excellence. Their annual review had praised our safety record, quality performance, and financial stability, noting that Martinez Construction had become one of their most reliable and successful clients. Perhaps most satisfying was the recognition we began receiving from industry organizations and professional associations. The Arizona Builders Association named Martinez Construction as their Commercial Contractor of the Year, citing our innovative safety programs, commitment to sustainable building practices, and contributions to workforce development through our apprenticeship program. The awards ceremony was held at a resort in Scottsdale, with over 500 construction industry professionals in attendance. As I accepted the award on behalf of our entire team, I thought about my grandfather standing in the desert heat 70 years earlier, laying concrete for his first commercial project with nothing but determination and borrowed tools. He could never have imagined that his small construction company would one day be recognized as the premier commercial builder in Arizona. The sustainable building practices that had contributed to our industry recognition represented a strategic decision to position Martinez Construction as a leader in environmentally responsible construction. The initial investment in training, equipment, and certification had been substantial, but the result was access to a growing market of clients who prioritized environmental performance in their building projects. We had completed 3 LEED-certified commercial buildings in the past year, with 2 more currently under construction. The expertise we developed in sustainable construction techniques had also allowed us to command premium pricing for projects that required specialized environmental compliance. This market positioning had proven to be both profitable and personally satisfying, knowing that our work was contributing to more sustainable development patterns in Phoenix. The apprenticeship program Frank had developed had evolved into something that exceeded our original expectations. We now had partnerships with 3 local high schools and 2 community colleges, providing pathways for young people to enter construction careers without accumulating substantial student debt. The program had received recognition from the State Department of Education, and had been featured in national trade publications as a model for industry workforce development. Watching young apprentices learn traditional construction skills while also mastering new technologies reminded me of my own journey learning the business from my grandfather and father. The construction industry needed to attract new talent to replace retiring workers, and programs like ours provided opportunities for motivated individuals to build successful careers while contributing to important community development projects. The municipal complex project that we were now officially contracted to build would serve as a showcase for everything Martinez Construction had become. The four-building complex would include advanced environmental systems, innovative safety features, and architectural elements that would make it a landmark in downtown Phoenix for generations to come. More importantly, the project would provide employment for over 150 construction workers for nearly 2 years, supporting families and contributing to the local economy in meaningful ways. The ripple effects of large construction projects extend far beyond the immediate worksite, creating opportunities for subcontractors, material suppliers, and service providers throughout the community. As I reviewed the final contract documents, I reflected on the journey that had brought Martinez Construction to this moment. The crisis that had nearly destroyed the company 18 months earlier had ultimately made us stronger, more focused, and more committed to the excellent standards that had always defined our best work. The leadership transition from Marcus to me had been painful but necessary. His brief tenure as supposed CEO had revealed weaknesses in our systems and procedures that needed to be addressed. More importantly, it had demonstrated the importance of aligning authority with capability, ensuring that leadership responsibilities are matched with the skills and commitment needed to fulfill them effectively. The discovery of my mother's secret ownership had provided the legal foundation for the transition, but the real work of rebuilding and improving the company had required months of focused effort from everyone in our organization. The success we now enjoyed was a testament to the dedication of employees who had remained committed to excellence even during uncertain times. Looking toward the future, I knew that new challenges would emerge that would test our capabilities in different ways. The construction industry would continue evolving, requiring ongoing investments in technology, training, and equipment. Competition would intensify as the Phoenix market continued growing and attracting new companies seeking opportunities in one of the nation's fastest-growing metropolitan areas. However, I felt confident that Martinez Construction was well-positioned to meet these challenges successfully. We had proven our ability to recover from crisis, adapt to changing conditions, and maintain operational excellence even under pressure. The foundation my grandfather had built, that my mother had quietly strengthened, that my father had expanded, was now solid enough to support whatever growth and changes the future might bring. The filing cabinet, full of old documents that had seemed like such an inadequate inheritance, had indeed contained the keys to my future and the future of everyone who depended on Martinez Construction for their livelihoods. But more than providing legal authority, those documents had represented my family's confidence in my ability to carry forward their legacy of hard work, integrity, and commitment to excellence. As I signed the final contract page for the municipal complex project, I realized that this moment represented not just a business milestone, but a personal transformation. I had evolved from someone who worked for the family company into someone who truly owned responsibility for its success and the welfare of everyone it employed. The journey from that devastating morning in the lawyer's office to this celebration of our largest contract ever had been challenging, educational, and ultimately transformative. The company that Marcus had nearly destroyed through inexperience and poor judgment was now stronger than ever, positioned for continued growth, while maintaining the values and standards that had always defined our best work. The dusty filing cabinet had indeed contained the most valuable inheritance anyone could receive: the opportunity to lead with purpose, the authority to make decisions that matter, and the responsibility to honor the sacrifices of those who came before while building something meaningful for those who would follow. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.